right, welcome back to the channel. So, Errol Spence Jr. knocks out Terence Crawford if Bud is not 100% in shape, and even then, he still might have problems. That according to the 126-pound kingpin, Gary Russell Jr. Let's talk about Gary Russell Jr.'s extremely precise and expert analysis of the Errol Spence Jr. Terence Crawford fight in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, man, yesterday on Instagram, I really had, man, a really good interview we did over there. If you're not following me on Instagram, follow me on Instagram. You should see it come down here somewhere several times through the video. When you see it, go subscribe to the channel. Go follow me on Instagram, and then on IGTV, you will see where the interview is. It's about our interview with Gary Russell Jr. that I was blessed to be able to do because Gary, and my prayers go out to his family. He has had an illness in his family. His father's been in and out of the hospital, and he granted me an exclusive interview. I really was appreciative, so I'm going to try to do my best to pay honor to what it is that he told me about this fight. And there's also a lot of really good subjects over there, so go check it out. But this particular bit that I asked him, I said, hey, man, Gary, tell me what you think honestly about, and I mean, I use the word honestly, he's not going to lie to me. Just tell me what you think, technically speaking, about Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford and how you see that fight play out. And he let me know, man. And he said basically it's two different type of things going on. One is he looked at it from the point of view of Terence Crawford, and then he looked at it from the point of Errol Spence Jr. And he was like, look, man, this is how I see it going down. And what he said was he saw that Errol Spence Jr., if Terence Crawford is not 100% on his A game, Errol Spence Jr. can knock him out, right? And I don't want to put words in his mouth. You can see the interview for himself, but I would have to suspect that if I had to put some money on it, he would have said I'd probably go with Errol Spence Jr., all things considered. But let's talk about it. But before I do that, the reason why you should listen, and I think that this is something where this is worth listening to and saying, okay, man, if I'm actually going to put some money on this down the line, who would I bet on? And that's what I asked the question for. That's why I asked that question to Gary Russell Jr. Because on this channel, we're getting a little bit more into the odds and things like that because we know a lot of people really do enjoy, gambling on the sport of boxing. So, hey, man, it is what it is. We're here. We'll serve that. We'll serve your need there, too. So, but Gary Russell Jr., dude, is one of the most ducked fighters in boxing. And for the reasons that he described in that video, it leads him to being, quite intelligent in his analysis of other fighters. So what did he have? What did he say? How can Terence Crawford win the fight? Let's talk about that first. How can Terence Crawford win the fight, according to Gary Russell Jr.? He says that Terence Crawford has to be in 100% physical conditioning. He has to be in the best shape of his life. Otherwise, he can see Errol Spence Jr. stopping him. So I said, Gary, why would you say that? Like, what about that? Why is that? He said, well, look, that Errol Spence Jr. is going to be the guy coming forward, right? And it takes less energy to go forward than it does to go backwards because your natural motion is to walk forward. It's not as natural to walk backwards. So the fact that you're constantly pushing backward and on the back foot, that takes more energy to move that way than it does for Errol Spence Jr., who is very concise and not a lot of wasted movement, is keeping it in the pocket and coming forward, right? So he said, look, man, if that's not the case, then you can see if he's not 100% in shape, you could see Errol Spence Jr. wearing him down over the course of the fight and eventually getting him out of there. So the next thing I was like, okay, but why is there any other technical reasons other than him just being tired? And what he mentioned was, look, Terence is going to have to be really, really tight in what he does. He's not he can't afford to do the things that against Errol Spence Jr. that he might necessarily do against, other fighters who are of a lesser talent or whose fighting style is not going to keep you pressure you, right? So he's like, look, all that kind of loopy stuff that he does, and when he goes through, he goes through periods of time of just wanting to exchange with people. He's like, look, man, he can't do that with Errol Spence Jr. He's like, he's not going to just be able to sit down and bang with Errol Spence Jr. in spots. He said he can do that in spots, but he's not going to be able to do that throughout the whole fight. So what he's going to have to do is he's going to really have to be in 100% condition, right? And he's going to have to pick his spots in which he wants to start. He wants to really exchange, in which he wants to exchange with Errol Spence Jr. So, dude, I thought that sounds just about perfect to me. I can't, and matter of fact, I don't really see too many holes in that whatsoever. Now, he didn't completely say that Terence Crawford didn't have an opportunity to win. He's like, if he does all those things, yeah, man, he's got, with his ring IQ, with his ability, with his speed and all that, and the skills that he does have, yeah, he said, yeah, I could see him, if everything was right, beating Errol Spence, but I could also see Errol Spence Jr. Stopping him. So in my book, man, that seems like maybe a 55-45 fight. My take on it is that I thought that was, first of all, I was really, really impressed with Gary Russell Jr.'s breakdown of that fight. Like I probably shouldn't have been so impressed because he's Gary Russell Jr. and he's the WBC the WBC featherweight champion of the world. He's one of the best amateurs. He's one of the best amateurs in the world. The guy's only lost one fight, the longest reigning major champion in boxing. And I'm going to say major champion because, dude, the 105 and 108 weight pound divisions, dude, come on, man. Somebody texted me yesterday, or didn't text me, DM'd me, and they were like, hey, Fanon, I just want to let you know I was watching the Zone card, and, I saw there was these, light flyweights. Somebody was up in there, and they were like, the champion was fighting somebody who had their sixth shot at a championship fight. Their sixth. Now, how much talent can there possibly be in those weight divisions if the same guy can get championship fights 6 times in the same weight class? Just means that there's not a lot of people to choose from that you got to pull, because there's just not a lot of guys that are that big. You know what I mean? So put Menelothian and Wolf to the side, dude. Gary Russell Jr. is the longest reigning champion in boxing. And he made mention of some other things, because I know you guys are going to come to the comment section with this corny stuff about, he only fights once a year. He only fights once a year. Dude, he fights his mandatory once a year because other guys will not get in the ring with him. Now, I'm not quite sure what you guys would rather have Gary Russell do. Would you rather have him fight? You already complaining about the mandatories like King Tug and JoJo Diaz, despite the fact that JoJo Diaz, Gary Russell Jr. beat him. I think that was the fight before last, and he moved up to 130 pounds and got a title there, and is a major title holder at 130 pounds. So, and Gary Russell Jr. beat him at 126, and he beat him very, very easily. And if he moves up to 130 pounds, he's going to beat JoJo Diaz just as easily. It's just, to me, it's like this little guy thing. It's really just an excuse, I think, to sell fighters that, that the top ranking these guys, have signed to them, and they're just going to try to, it's the fight that they can make that ain't expensive. It's just not terrible stuff, but, whatever, man. Now, anyway, I got a little bit distracted. Now, Gary said, talking about Errol Spence Jr., he also said, hey, though, man, I really, really, really want to see Errol Spence Jr. off this car accident and see how he's doing off the car accident, because there's, a lot of times, those things really can take something out of somebody. So he's still waiting to see that. So now he's not. But the good thing about that is that we're not going to have to worry about that, because the fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. ain't happening before 2022 anyway. And my personal opinion is that, with Bob Arum and the way that he acts, I don't know, man. I think that they're going to probably try to set up, Terence Crawford to feed him to some other guy moving up from 140 pounds. This Kell Brook fight that's coming up, man, that's going to be, I see Terence Crawford winning it, but I think it's going to go to the decision. And I think if it goes to the decision, then Terence Crawford is going to get dropped off of his number 1 pound for pound thing, right? Because Monster Inoue will knock somebody out. If Terence Crawford goes 12 rounds, then he'll be out of there. Monster Inoue will be number 1. Then ESPN and Top Rank will have a new number 1 guy. And because they have a new number one guy, you know, Terence Crawford is going to go further down the totem pole, man. And I don't see, unless he actually leaves the PB, unless he leaves Top Rank, I just have a hard time seeing, you know, where he's going to get that fight very easily with Errol Spence, man. You already got guys like Keith Thurman saying that he's going to fight Errol Spence Jr. after he gets past Ugas, you know, provided that Errol gets past Danny. But, you know, the good thing is that at least on the PBC side, man, we are getting to see these guys fight each other. We will be seeing Danny Garcia and Errol Spence Jr. In Dallas this December. But as far as, you know, Terrence getting in the mix with those guys, it's just so hard for me to see. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think. And with that, I'm out. Peace.